Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem, amma ba'd. So inshallah, in this lesson, we'll be starting the booklet, a small little booklet that we prepared, First Steps to Understanding Usool Fiqh. And these are all of our, as with all of our first steps to understanding things, all these small little introductions for you to get a small idea, basic idea of the main terms, how things work. It's not some kind of in-depth book that covers everything and it makes you into a master of the science. It's just the first little footsteps so you understand, okay, these are the terms, these are the bab, main headings, main topics, main discussion, and from there you can make your way around. Yeah? So we did the first steps to understanding Arabic before a couple of years ago. Was it 4 years now? No, not 4 years, probably less than that. About 3 years ago. Yeah, so now we can do this book, inshallah. Okay, so before we move on, we have to understand, well, what is this? What is science actually? What's the name? Usool Fiqh. So the word aslun, what does the word aslun mean? Aslun means root. Say aslun here means the root, a source. It has many meanings. You say here, it's not working for some reason. It means here root, it means source, and you can say here rules. We translate this as rules, so rules. And the plural of aslun is what? Usulun. So aslun means a singular, which means root, rules, qawaid, principles. And then the word fiqh, we all know what fiqh is, what we said in Quduri, rules and things. So what happens in this science is we learn about certain rules or certain methodologies, certain principles, certain qawaid, certain things that the fuqaha use for, number one, to understand the text. You have two verses, and they seem to have, well, slightly contradictory issues or slightly, they say, no, it's not contradictory. If you understand it in this way, there's no contradiction. Which one do we give preference to? So is this kind of how to understand, some kind of rules and principles by which we understand the text? Yes, everyone following me so far? Yeah, is that clear? Also, these rules are also used to apply, instead of rule, I said new rulings, new masail. So for example, so the first one I said to you before is that you have these rules, these qawaid. We can use these to understand the text, understand the hadith, understand the Quran properly. Secondly, we can say, well, okay, we have a principle, a rule from the Quran, from the hadith, and now we're going to learn to apply this to a new rule that doesn't exist. And let's say, for example, a computer. We never had computers in the Prophet ﷺ's time. So would we say it's halal, it's haram, it's permissible, it's wajib, it's faraz, what is it? Obviously, very obvious example. But on what principles will we apply to this? For example, in the Prophet ﷺ's times, they never had something that never existed then. So we said, well, look, based on this, we can apply that rule to here. So it kind of gives us some kind of framework to work with. So it's principles that which a scholar, the mujtahid, the fuqaha, the muftis use to try to derive new rulings. Understood? The basic, what the science is about? Yes? Everyone following? Yeah? Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. The next thing we have to remember is that these rules are these are man-made rules, right? And for all of these have exceptions. All of these rules will have what? Exceptions. Not well, all of them, but some of them are exceptions. So now let's say, for example, you learn something here. You learn a particular rule, or particular system, or a particular method, or particular concept. It will not apply every single place. It's a general rule of thumb. So you understand? So you have to keep that in mind, that it works most places, or it works a lot of places, but you have sort of exemptions. Also, you say, well, okay, yes, it has an exception, but you know what? It has it's a masala, but it has multiple rules applied to this one. So he's not applying this principle, applying this principle. You understand? So you're not gonna learn like math. If you learn a 5 times table, there's only one right answer. You get it? It's more of like different theories you apply. So, well, you apply this theory or you apply this theory. Like science, if you mix two liquids together or anyway certain properties, you're gonna get one result every single time. In a court of law, you say, well, okay, you know what? How do we look at this case? We look at it in comparison to X case or Y case. So it's a bit more flexible, and you're not going to get absolute 100%. That's why the fuqaha differ. If it was like maths and science, it was every time you get one answer. You understand? You following? So keep that in mind before we go through some of these other rules. You also have to remember that you will not be able to use these rules and say, oh, well, because of this rule, the Sahaba done something wrong, na'udhu billahi min dhalik. Or this rule doesn't apply to this masala, the Sahaba done. It's like, no. Those rules were came first. The Sahaba put these masail, these things in place, and you're going to find you can't go back and say, well, you know what, we're going to change, establish meaning from the Prophet ﷺ time, Sahabi's time, the Tabi'un's time, the earlier generation. So you might find a rule here which is not fit to a masjid that may have them, but that will take precedence. So what is I'm trying to teach you, what I'm trying to tell you is that here we're going to learn some basic principles, some basic ways of thinking, basic ways of fuqaha, analyze the text. But this is not like a like a it's guidelines, it's a framework, but it's not something. It's something you need to study a lot more detail. You have to know many more masail, many more books of fiqh, many furu', many like masail. Then you get a bigger idea of okay how things work. This science is, especially at this level, what we're studying is basic introduction. So you can ask as many questions as you want, as always. But like sometimes I will have to say to you, okay, yeah, it doesn't apply in this masala. I mean, even give an example where this rule doesn't apply here in this masala. Sahaba does something different, Prophet does something different. It's a rule that applies most places, but this is an exemption, etc., etc. You learn. Yes, and by studying these rules, you don't become some kind of like some kind of mujtahid like Imam Abu Hanifa, where you can start making up your own stuff. Yes, it gives you an idea of a framework to how they understood the text, or why the fuqaha differed, why they have different masail. Everybody with me so far? Everybody following? Yes. Any questions? Okay. Yeah. And when we have new rulings, like a new masla come out, let's say for example, um, like Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, like so this is what these rules are used for. We can't just say, well, I learned one rule here. You would have to know many rules. You would have to know many masail of fiqh, many rules of fiqh. So there's two things. One is qawa'id, the rules. That's like that will apply many places. One is a mas'ala, a one-off mas'ala. So when najasa leaves kullu ma kharaja min sabilain, breaks wuzu. That's a mas'ala. And then the qaida is, for example, in normal things, the general rule is that it's halal. Like any fruit you find is halal. That's the general rule. That's called a qaida. So one is a qaida, or one is an asal, one is a masala. So just a few small little things we've just mentioned before we start the main book. So just keep in mind that anybody, this is for the students really. Anybody watching online, then don't. The online is basic for the students to revise, and maybe somebody else in the later years need to just recap or revise or recheck. That's for them. To study something online is very difficult. But if you want to just follow the series along to gain some information and knowledge, that's a bit knowledge, fine. But ideally, study by teacher. Even when you study with me, even this book, it's just to give you a small introductory framework of how this science works. Does everybody understand what we're going to study here? So we're studying Usool al-Fiqh, some qawaid, some rules, some principles which the fuqaha apply many places in their rulings, in their methodologies, in their structure, in their fiqh. And we learn some of these and again an idea of the main terms. And once this is finished, then you can go on to a detailed book, a more detailed book. But Usul Shashi, normally madrasa do Usul Shashi first, and after I have Nunu Anwar, and then the higher madrasas have other books, Musallam Mustabut, and all those kind of things, Talwi wa Tawzi. Yes? But we're going to do this book for now, and then we see where it goes from there, inshallah. Yeah, so in here we'll just get a basic introduction. Understood? Any questions? Okay, so inshallah we'll stop here today, inshallah. Yes? Okay, subhanallah wa bihamdihi subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.